Okay, so we're going to get started, and so welcome to the Tennessee Principal Professional Learning Series. My name is Jim McIntyre, and I serve as the Director of the Center for Educational Leadership at the University of Tennessee. And I think, as many of you know, during the current public health crisis, the University of Tennessee has developed this program of 7 professional learning modules that will, we hope, provide some research and information and a chance for some professional dialogue around several of the key leadership challenges that principals in the volunteer state are facing right now. Today's session is on school culture and collaboration, and it's organized around 3 recorded video presentations that are going to examine how to build a positive school culture and how to foster effective collaboration to support equity and excellence for our students. So in addition to the presentations, you'll have a chance today for some small group conversation among your peers as well. You can access all of the resources for this session at our website at the Center for Educational Leadership, and the website is shown, the web address is shown on the current slide. You'll be able to access the slides that I'm presenting. You'll be able to access the slides from our expert presenters. You'll be able to access all the videos and resources for today's session. So I really encourage you to go to our website, go to the Principal Professional Learning Series Module 7 page or section on our website and access all of those resources. Toward the end of this session, as always, there'll be a survey link that we will provide to you to be able to do a survey. We really ask for your feedback, and also that survey will allow the Tennessee Department of Education to know how to allocate your tassel credit either to this year or to next year. You see on this slide that we are in Module 7, and this is the final module of the Principal Professional Learning Series. And this session is on resetting school culture and collaboration for the fall. The good news is that all 6 of the previous modules are, the resources and information are on our website at the Center for Educational Leadership, including the recorded videos of the sessions as well. So if you missed any of our Principal Professional Learning Series, you can go back and see those at any time. Before we begin, I want to reiterate, as always, my thanks to Commissioner Schwinn and the Tennessee Department of Education for making this extraordinary opportunity available to public school principals in Tennessee. I want to thank the University of Tennessee for supporting our work, and I also want to recognize the contributions of our content experts and the support of our philanthropic partners, including the American Institutes for Research, Education First, and Tennessee SCORE. We're delighted today to have Matthew Clifford from the American Institutes for Research and Rashida Lopez-Morgan from Education First as our expert presenters on school culture and collaboration. We'll begin with a video presentation by Dr. Clifford that will look at the research around building a positive school culture to support student success. This first video presentation will run about 20 minutes, after which we'll have some time for small group conversation. So we'll move to the presentation by Dr. Clifford right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Tennessee Principal Professional Learning Series session called Beyond Quarantine, Resetting School Culture, Collaboration, and Community. My name is Matthew Clifford, and I'm a principal researcher at American Institutes for Research. After teaching and leading schools for about 10 years, I've spent the past 15 years studying conditions for school leadership by examining how principals are identified, supported, and evaluated to improve their schools, and also what happens in schools to make them more effective and change more rapidly. In this session, Rashida Morgan from Education First and I will introduce a framework for resetting schools, which we hope will be helpful to you in your school planning over the summer. This session focuses on rebuilding relationships and systems with educators and community members in the new year, so that you can enter the fall prepared for the unexpected and to respond to students' learning and developmental needs. Jim McIntyre just asked you to complete a short poll about your school's responses to the shutdowns associated with COVID-19. The poll information should be displayed on your screen just to the right. We completed a similar poll with 96 principals in another state, and we found that the majority of principals believe their schools responded quickly to the shutdowns but that teaching and learning, which are really core functions to what we do in schools, were challenged. And specifically, we were challenged to respond equitably to all students' learning needs. About 35% of the survey respondents, all principals, did not fully launch e-learning for their students. And so they expected that there would be disruptions in student learning as a result. And 33% offered that the same learning to all students, regardless of their developmental context. So that's the bar that shows that e-learning was provided without differentiation or personalization. And what they said was that under normal circumstances, they were able to differentiate and personalize learning, but under the new situation, they were unable to do so. In 9% of the schools, principals told us that they were able to tailor learning to students' needs by personalizing and differentiating it, even when e-learning was occurring. They found a way to make it happen and work outside the parameters posed by school closures. So this raises a question for us. What is happening in these 9% of schools? What is the principal doing here that allowed the schools to pivot quickly to a new learning environment? Researchers have been studying this question in education and other contexts for a long time to understand why certain types of organizations or in education, schools, which are otherwise very similar, can outpace and outperform other organizations. Researchers in business, healthcare, and other sectors have been looking at this question for a long period of time. And they've been asking, really, what's the difference? Most of the researchers come back and they have identified school culture as a real differentiator between school organizations. What they have said is that school culture is associated with higher levels of collaboration, a strong sense of community, and those schools that have collaboration, community, and strong school culture tend to outperform other similar schools. Studies of high-performing and rapidly improving schools point to school culture as a common ingredient. Similarly, school culture has been positively correlated with high teacher retention and rapid organizational change. Behind these healthy organizations are school principals that help to guide school culture and move schools to greater performance and higher levels of work. So what do school principals do, and what do these schools with strong school culture do to make a difference? And of course, how do we build school culture and maintain it over time so that student performance is supported? Meta-analyses of school culture studies provide some ideas about how best to improve school culture. And this slide contains two things. First, on the left-hand side, we've got some key ingredients to school culture that we might want to think about. And then on the right-hand side, we're displaying the framework that Rashida and I will spend much of the remainder of the time talking about. So first, meta-analyses of school culture identify 7 key ingredients to make school culture strong. First, within a school, schools with strong school culture have higher levels of trust between colleagues and school administrators, and those peer-to-peer relationships carry them through difficult times. Second, schools with strong culture have a physical and emotional safety. So the adults in the building feel safe to experiment and try new things in order to meet the needs of students. Staff engagement together in solving problems is another key ingredient of school culture. This means that staff collaboratively come together and work together on problems that are core to the school's function in order to make learning better for all students. Another ingredient, the fourth here, is mutual accountability and support, which means that each adult in the building is accountable to one another and supports one another in moving their work forward. The fifth ingredient is autonomy to innovate. In other words, the educators in the building have a sense of freedom to try new things and hopefully succeed, but when they fail, there's no significant repercussions for their professionalism in their attempts to make student performance better. The sixth is a common sense of school mission, and the principals in the building have been successful in building a sense of urgency and around the school mission, and the educators in the building believe that the school mission is actually attainable. And then lastly, time is a common denominator for each one of us, and it's something that's become more precious as we've had to accelerate the change in school. So in school cultures that are considered to be strong, the educators in the building say that they have time to teach and to learn together in order to perform better. So these are the key ingredients of a strong school culture. Now, if we turn to the framework, we can kind of see how school culture works. In the uppermost triangle on the page, you see teachers, students, and school administrators have relationships that are characterized by the 7 key ingredients of culture. These relationships create conditions for personalized and differentiated student performance or student learning to occur. And these are the things that keep teachers in the building even when times get tough. School principals have everything to do with these relationships, and oftentimes you're intimately involved with the teachers and students in creating positive relationships between all 3. School principals also affect the supports in the building. And by supports, we mean the conditions for teaching and learning to occur. These conditions have 3 pieces to them. One is routines, the second one is capacities, and the third we call structures. By routines, we mean the traditions, celebrations, ways of working within schools that might include the ways that decisions are made or the level of collaboration between teachers in the building. By capacities, we mean the amount of time, the types of talent, the amount of resources in a school that are available to support teachers' work and students' work. And then lastly are the structures. Structures are the policies, finances, and the organizational structure that creates relationships in order to get work done. The routines, capacities, and structures within the organization are the levers that you as principals can pull to affect the school culture, bring about greater trust and mutual accountability, for example. During the period of school closures, many of the routines, capacities, and structures were disrupted because our work has been dependent on face-to-face interactions every day. Schools that were engaged in personalized learning, for instance, oftentimes relied on in-person classroom flexibility to adjust content, or meetings among teachers to examine student work and support each other in finding ways to better personalize learning and increase educational equity within schools. With e-learning, many schools were unable to adjust to provide staff members time to meet in order to think about students as individuals in supporting learning. And maybe your school was different, but many schools struggled with this that I know of. And in part, the struggle was because we were pushed into an online environment, and our schools were responding to the urgent needs of students, their families, and communities. But as we're thinking about restarting and resetting school culture, the question is, what are the things that we can do to put a strong school culture in place? And also, were there some things that we learned about school culture during the disruptions that we think need to be addressed or need to be strengthened as we come back together in school? So that's the kind of the driving question that I would have for you as you're thinking about restarting school culture. How can we, or as principals, restart school culture to improve differentiation and personalization for students during these uncertain times? And also, how can we be better positioned so that if school closures occur again, we can be more successful in supporting students? So in the next section, I'll talk a little bit about some thinking that national organizations have done around the structures related to restarting school culture. And then Rashida will say a little bit about routines and capacities for collaboration. Now, in this next session, I should mention that there's no research on which structures are necessary for resetting schools. We're really in unprecedented times at this point, and a lot of these ideas come from national organizations who have come together to examine best practices and think about how schools can be restarted. So a few organizations like American Institutes for Research, National Association of Elementary School Principals, American Association of School Administrators, National Association of Secondary School Principals, and the Council of Chief State School Officers have begun thinking about what are the key functions and structures that need to be in place within districts and specifically within schools to restart and plan for an uncertain future. These structures could be in place whether you're pursuing a hybrid model of restarting or some other approach to restarting as states are thinking through the different models. The organizations are thinking that functional groups, so these are groups that are created to address certain types of knowledge or certain problems that may come up within a school, are necessary and should be created or should be infused into existing teams in order to restart the school and plan for next year. Specifically, the groups have talked about 5 different teams that could be put in place to support personalized and differentiated learning for kids. First is the health and safety function, where a functional team within a school would work to monitor the health and safety of all students and the community members and make strategic decisions about school operations and the operations within the school to preserve the safety of the student body and the educators, and make strategic calls about whether or not a certain approach to learning can actually happen. The teaching and learning function expands upon grade level teams and content area teams, and thinks about how e-learning and other approaches can be put in place to support each student's development, both socially and emotionally, and also academically. The social and emotional health function takes a look at the health not only of students, but also the faculty and other educators within the building. Thinks about programming that and tiered support that may be necessary for both faculty members and students in an online and an in-person environment. And then finally, family and community relations. That functional group works on communications with families, communities, community groups, and other professionals who are supporting the health and welfare of members of the community. And then finally, the school leadership team oversees and coordinates the work of these 4 groups and ensures that information is being shared across groups and makes decisions about the trajectory of the school, whether it remains open, under what conditions it remains open, and how to restart schools in the fall term. So these 5 teams are considered to be really important to the work of schools as you're moving into the fall, and may provide a structure for decision making and for collaboration so that each educator in the building understands and is engaged in supporting the school and restarting. Each of the teams takes up important decisions and questions, which are displayed here on the screen, and hopefully will be available to you in your discussion section next. So here we raise up questions related to the functions of each of the teams, and as you can see from these questions, one of the things that each one of the teams does is assesses needs. So each one is responsible for one aspect of the school and assesses needs of students, faculty members, and others in order to provide information to the school leadership team and other members of the faculty about how to move forward. If your functional teams are organized around these needs and considers the supports of the school, you're according to the groups that have put these ideas together, you're on the road to restarting school culture and resetting your school for a healthy fall. So that's a super brief overview of some thoughts from national organizations, but also from research. And so I'm going to transition over to the discussion section so that you can take up some of these ideas and talk about them in smaller groups. So a few questions for discussion are here on the screen, and I think we have 6 to 8 minutes in order to address some of the questions. First, what has helped you to maintain a positive school culture during the period of school closures? You may want to take that up in your group. Secondly, what functional groups do you have in place, and which ones might be developed in order to support school restart? And then how will the teams be coordinated to support problem solving in your school? And how can the teams work to help restart school culture? So thanks for taking a couple minutes to listen to these ideas. And we're looking forward to coming back from discussion and learning a little bit more about the routines and capacities of school culture.
Excellent. Well, our thanks to Dr. Matthew Clifford from American Institutes for Research for getting us started with a great conversation and a great presentation on school culture. So we're going to move into small groups right now for some small group conversation. You'll get an invitation in just a moment to a breakout room. When you accept that, it will take you to the small group conversation. We'll have facilitators in the small group. And the questions we're going to dive into are the ones that Dr. Clifford talked about in his presentation, plus a couple more. So certainly, want to ask and talk about what's helped you to maintain a positive school culture during the school closures. And then which features of effective school culture might be particularly important as we return to school in the fall. And I have put the features of effective school culture in the box on the side there. All of these slides are available on our website at the Center for Educational Leadership. And so, and I've also put these questions into the chat. So when you go, you might want to either pull them out of the chat or go to our website to get the slides so you have them in front of you for the small group conversation. And then how will you foster positive and productive relationships? That's incredibly important to a positive school culture that supports learning, and something that I think we're pretty good at here in education in the state of Tennessee. And then what functional teams do you currently have in place or are you considering? And how will the team's work be coordinated to support problem solving and help to restart school culture in your building? So I'm going to ask you to turn on your video and turn on your microphone and accept the invitation to the small group that I sent right now. And we'll look forward to some small group discussion for about 8 or 9 minutes. All right, welcome back from our small groups, and appreciate you taking the time for that professional conversation. Hope it went well. It's a great start because we're going to have 2 more times to go back to small group conversation around the issues of school culture and collaboration. But right now we're going to move into a second video presentation of our 3 today, and this one is facilitated by Rashida Lopez-Morgan from Education First. And this presentation will introduce a tool called the Collaboration Continuum. And you can access the full document, the Collaboration Continuum document, on our website at the Center for Educational Leadership. And I'm going to move to the presentation right now.
Good morning. My name is Rashida Lopez-Morgan, and I'm with Education First. We're a national policy and strategy education firm, and we do a lot of work with state education agencies, nonprofits, foundations, and certainly districts and charters. In my work, I get the opportunity to work with a lot of leaders, SEA leaders, so state education agency leaders, district and charter leaders, and certainly with school leaders. So I'm excited to talk with you this morning about what it looks like to reset school culture and collaboration and community in the face of responding to COVID-19. So for the next few minutes, that's how I'll plan to spend my time with you, and we'll continue the discussion that Matt started earlier this morning. So here we go. As Matt shared, culture and collaboration, they're critical for creating conditions for high quality personalized learning. As you know, the relationships between students, teachers, and school leaders, they're supported by the routines, the capacities, and structures that are in place. Matt talked a little bit about these, things like trust, solving problems together, mutual accountability and support, physical and emotional safety, autonomy to innovate, a common sense of school mission, and time to teach and learn are critical and key components for creating conditions for high quality personalized learning. So Matt focused on structures. For my time with you, I'm going to focus on the routines and capacities needed to strengthen relationships and operate with higher levels of collaboration. Education First created the Collaboration Continuum, which is part of it was created and relayed as part of the Coherence Lab Fellowship, an initiative that's co-led by the Aspen Institute, CCSSO, and Education First. And it focuses on bringing together state, district, and school leaders to support coherent policy to practice experience for teachers and principals. It really describes where teams and organizations can fall or often fall on a continuum that characterizes collaboration by capacities and routines. The characteristics focus on features such as information sharing, decision-making, communication, and transparency. And it's grounded in research our team conducted about the conditions under which collaborative teams thrive. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes sharing the characteristics of these teams and the different stages on the continuum. And as I share, I'll ask you to think about how teams operate in your building and consider which characteristics most often apply to how teams operate. Teams in the compete stage and the folks who are on those teams often operate as if they're competing for secure and limited resources. So they'll operate with low levels of trust, meaning they don't quite trust each other, and they view their work as conflicting and distinct, not interdependent or depending on each other. There are low levels of trust, as I said before, and then the teams and individuals, because of that low level of trust, feel like they need to guard information rather than sharing it. They don't have regular routines in place to share information or to work together. And hierarchical and traditional reporting relationship structures, those are going to be the primary mechanisms within which information is shared. Operating this way can result in disjointed, conflicting, and sometimes incorrect information that is shared both internally and externally. Teams that coexist and individuals on those teams, so teams that are operating in the coexist stage, they're operating in independent silos, even though the culture and this approach is well-meaning. Teams and individuals don't quite compete, but they're not going to move out of their lane. They're going to stay in their lane. They're going to stay focused on staying in their lane. There's no incentive to build trust and partnership, and there's no focus on mutual beneficial relationships. So team members aren't seeking out opportunities to identify and cultivate mutually beneficial relationships. And when they do, they may face obstacles since everybody's trying to stay in their lane. Teams that operate this way, they likely set their goals in isolation and without awareness of what's happening on other teams. Decision-making can vary based on the individual leadership style, and each department or each team has its own unique routines for exchanging information and working together. So rather than having a shared approach across all teams. While information is easily shared throughout the organization, it's not shared across teams. Since external communication is likely developed and shared directly with audiences without any clarity on what other teams are doing, it may conflict and be contradictory. So in a school community, this might look like when a teacher conveys a message to her students about something that's happening in the school, but the message students and parents receive from administration is different. The next stage in the continuum is the communicate stage. Teams in the communicate stage and individuals on those teams regularly exchange information and are focused on mutual benefits. There's a high level of motivation to work together on the teams, although there may not be the routines in place to work together. Information is transparently provided, but how that information is used is unclear. Connection points between information and decisions are not necessarily made. And finally, planning processes do not consider what is needed for coordination and collaboration. So as an example of this, it might be a grade level teams coming together to plan in their individual teams, but only communicating their goals to other grade levels rather than participating in any vertical planning in which grade level teams get to interact with each other and even contribute to, or at a minimum, understand the goals that teams have set. One other feature or characteristic of teams in the communication stage is that external communications may have overlapping or conflicting messages, even still, since the structures that need to be in place to regularly exchange information, the routines that are in place, they're not always there. Teams in the coordinate stage create a shared vision that is well understood by the majority of the staff. So these teams, they may still operate in silos a little, but there are work groups in place to bring them together based on shared interests and goals. Efforts to coordinate are intentionally designed to lead to greater outcomes, but they're not always systematically implemented across the organization. Trust and the desire to coordinate exist, so that is key. Individuals are willing to learn from each other and make corrections to spur improvement. And shared information is processed, and there are routines for ongoing coordination, which is also key. Teams regularly share information, and decisions made by leaders are transparently shared with staff. An example of this might be a principal who consistently brings the staff together, teachers together for planning and for their school-wide meetings, and he or she is consistently sharing key decisions and outcomes from staff meetings. with teachers so that they can effectively coordinate with each other. Finally, external communications aren't conflicting because they are coordinated, because the systems are in place for that to happen. Finally, the final stage in the continuum is the collaborate stage. And in this stage, teams, they have a shared vision with initiatives that align to that shared vision. Teams identify critical interdependencies and they execute against shared priorities and ownership. Planning maximizes opportunity for impact within and across the team. Leadership frequently highlights exemplars of collaboration from within the organization at all levels. Leaders are champions and committed to creating enabling conditions to support collaboration vertically and horizontally. Support for collaboration is evident from top down. There's a deep commitment to continuous improvement, and there are opportunities for shared learning and reflection. So an example of this is a school where a principal has engaged all teachers and staff in identifying and setting academic goals, and then communicates those academic goals regularly throughout the year, and then has meetings and routines in place that are all about understanding and supporting those academic goals and working together across grade level teams to meet those academic goals. And then external communications in these instances, they're carefully crafted and shared among a number of vehicles. So that might look like a principal who has a newsletter and who has a way to communicate key messages via phone, and also has paper, a way to communicate via paper. We're going to take a moment here in a second in small groups to talk a little bit about the collaboration continuum and how it comes to life in your buildings. But before we do, I want to share a final reflection about the role listening plays in building strong culture, collaboration, and community. In his TED Talk, Ernesto Cirioli talks about the paternalistic approach that is often taken to help communities, which can result in more damage than good. So when folks come into a community and they assume they know what the problem is, and even do what they think is due diligence to understand what the problem is, and then move forward with a solution, often they do more damage than good. Instead, he says he had to do something very different to truly help when he was in this situation, and that was shut up and listen. So his TED Talk has really good insights into his story, his experience, and his lessons about what it looks like to shut up and listen. And we're sending that in the materials that you have. As you're returning to your buildings, a big part of your jobs will be to listen to your colleagues, students, and families to truly be able to help them. So in the materials, I've included resources for something you can use to do that which is called empathy interviews. In the Coherence Lab Fellowship, we discuss the important role empathy plays in listening to understand. It is, in fact, at the center. Empathy interviews are a way to help you listen and hear from others in a way that is relational instead of transactional. When you're listening to really understand experiences and what a problem is from that point of view, and not leading with your own opinion or your own focus, quite frankly, on identifying a solution, but rather really trying to understand the problem better. I've included some guidelines in the resources for how to conduct an empathy interview, but would encourage you to try to conduct empathy interviews with your team, with community members, and with your students. It will be some of the most important data you collect as you prioritize your plans when school reopens. It will also be one way to attend to the social and emotional needs of your colleagues and your community, since feeling heard and seen goes such a long way with one's social and emotional health. So as we turn to begin our discussion, and here are the discussion questions, I just want to remind you to remember that your focus on high quality personalization and instruction undergirds your focus on collaboration and culture. Everything that you're doing and you're collaborating about and your culture should be focused on this high quality personalized instruction for your students. Having the right structures, routines, and capacities to support the relationship between students and families, teachers and school leaders is key, even as logistics of schooling changes. Because even as logistics change, best practices remain best practices. So I encourage you to remain focused on adapting best practices to your context. So I hope the collaboration continuum was helpful and gave you some things to think about, a way to think about what collaboration can look like in your building. If there's anything that I can do or we can do from Education First to support you with your work, please don't hesitate to reach out and invite you to now turn in your small groups to discuss these questions that are focused on really reflecting on the collaboration continuum and what could apply in your context, as well as the stage of the collaboration continuum that describes how teams operate. And then finally, thinking about shifts you could make in your building to more effectively coordinate or collaborate. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you to Rashida Lopez-Morgan for that presentation. We are going to go into a small group conversation in just a moment again. But first, I want you to take a moment, if you would, and just to think and reflect on this collaboration continuum tool and where your school might fit in terms of how teams are operating in your school and where they might fit on this continuum. So we're going to take about 3 minutes for individual reflections. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One, what stage of the collaboration continuum best reflects the current state of how teams operate in your school? And then 2, what strengths do you see around collaboration in your school, and where do you feel like your school could get better? Again, the full collaboration continuum document is on our website at the Center for Educational Leadership, and it might be good to pull that up to see some of the routines and structures that really reflect each of these stages of the collaboration continuum. And so we're going to ask you to do some individual reflection. Question 1 is really just for you to think about where you are in this continuum at your school. And then we will talk more in the small groups about question 2 in just a moment. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes from right now for quiet individual reflection, and then we'll move into small groups. So 3 minutes from right now. Okay, and we're going to go back to small group conversation here in just a second. And here are the questions that we'll ask you to think about and consider. I've also put them in the chat, so you can pull those there, or again, pull up these slides at our website at the Center for Educational Leadership, so you have them in front of you. And these questions reflect what Rashida Lopez-Morgan talked about in the video. So lots of conversation about what kind of strengths you see in your school. I want you to think about, in the first question, which characteristics of collaborative teams are most relevant to the work that you do in your school. And then really to think about what this notion of capacities and routines and structures that might enhance collaboration in your school. So lots of good things to talk about, and I'm going to invite you to small groups right now. Okay, welcome back from your small groups. I hope you had a productive conversation, and we're going to move into our third and final video presentation today. And we're excited because for this one, we have both Matthew Clifford and Rashida Lopez-Morgan, and they're going to present jointly and discuss an example of school collaboration around instructional practice. So they're going to look at the Capital City Public Charter School and their instructional team and really dig into how they interact with each other and how they collaborate around student learning. So I will note that this is the second charter school that we've highlighted in the Principal Professional Learning series. And it's not because we believe charter schools necessarily do a better job of educating children. It may just be because they do a better job of videotaping themselves and than we do in traditional public schools. They may do a better job of telling their story and documenting it. So we're delighted to have this video of their instructional leadership team and how they interact in real time. And we'll go right now to the presentation from Matt Clifford and Rashida Lopez-Morgan.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back from your discussion section. It's Matt and Rashida here again. We wanted to help you to put all these ideas together, and no doubt that your discussion has been rich about applying them to your own school. We always like to have examples of practice, and so what we've done is we've located a video from Creative Commons. It's located on YouTube, and you can take a look at it afterwards. But we wanted to highlight the work of Capital City Public Charter Schools in Washington, D.C., as they've been working over the past several years to personalize learning and differentiate learning by building up a school culture focused on data and collaboration among educators. And so we'd like to just take a few minutes, and as you're looking at this video, think about how this principal, who's here on screen, has put together a system to ensure that educators are collaborating, working together, examining student work, and making important decisions about the system of personalized learning for each student to address educational equity and also student achievement. So as you're looking at the video, reflect in your mind. Think about the routines, capacities, and structures that this principal has in place to support that learning. I'll switch over to my browser now and show the video so that we can talk a little bit more about the framework.
We don't meet for meeting's sake. We don't do structures to just say that we're doing them. It is critical that we really question what we're doing all the time.
I don't know about for your small groups.
The ILT is the team that's really going to push our thinking, and when we're not meeting the mark, I trust them to call me out on it because they're the voice of my entire staff.
I think that's also logistics.
We ask a lot of hard questions.
Overall, how are we measuring value added of these programs?
I get pushed by the members of my ILT. I trust them to push me and to ask questions.
Is the intensive structure closing gaps, maintaining them, or actually increasing them?
The answer might not be the answer that I want it to be, or it might be something that we really have to think about as an ILT. So data is critical for an instructional leadership team, because if we're making decisions around changing something or tweaking or sustaining a structure, we cannot have a conversation about a structure subjectively without having data at the table to really help guide. One of our topics in January was around the blended learning platforms that we're using. So we wanted to look at the data that we have over the course of the past 3 months to really focus on, is this working? Are these platforms working?
No additional pieces. It is just, what do you notice about the data?
Where is it working better, and how can we then leverage that across other grade levels?
Typed it in, just we're gonna go through and popcorn read, but read what you typed in. But remember, and I'm gonna say this without calling anybody out, we're only doing what we noticed, not any wonders or implications.
Hold yourself out.
Just what we noticed. Then you can add that in when we come back for the second round. Okay? So let's start with the first one.
AA and AB are particularly low in their completion of lessons, and I am in charge of those classes.
Okay.
So I own up to it.
You don't have to.
I do. I out myself. I out myself. It's all right. I'm reflective of my practice.
During ILT meetings, we try to adhere to protocols because protocols have intentions behind them. And those intentions are generally to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard, that we're doing things strategically.
And then for 6A Reading Plus, they have the lowest percentages for lessons attempted, lessons passed, and average time spent, but they have the highest percentage for the overall post-quiz.
We were doing a protocol where we were strictly noticing something first. Like, you have to, don't start evaluating things. Be objective, see what we notice so that we can then move on and do the thinking behind it. But without that part of it, like, you could tend to, your biases can get in the way. Like, you can just start making some assumptions without having like pinpointed the just the data right in front of you.
What's the relationship between the average time spent with the program per week and the percentage of completed assignments?
It's partly about sharing the airspace, but it's also about like adhering to like accurate knowledge.
And it was interesting that in Imagine Math, October seemed like it was a strong month, and I don't know if it was, nope. October was a strong month. Darn it.
It's a quick adjustment, because if we start jumping ahead before we've done the individual thinking, it's sort of like being in a classroom where you don't allow think time.
The next layer is, what does the data actually imply?
So what students' attitudes are towards these programs, how they affect how they feel about or their views of math and reading more long term.
As beyond lesson completion, how can we analyze data in an equitable manner?
So what were some of the overall implications that we just named?
There's differences in implementation, the amount of time that students were in it.
So we've named our observations and our noticings about the data. We've talked about some of the implications. What are like questions that we need to think about that can help us, like Sam, what you said about John's conferencing piece and that being effective and having a positive impact. A next step might be, how do we, leverage that across grade levels? We're gonna go through last round. Read your question or next step statement.
I was wondering, do we need to model going through an actual lesson with students? I'm curious if observations of the other two cohorts while they're working on Imagine Math, if that would be eye-opening.
Do we know what teachers are doing in the successful classrooms and what are the best practices?
So I think it's important for us to bring these questions back to our team.
And so that's numbers data. But then another conversation that we had in January was a new structure that we introduced this year around how we use some of our flexible time.
We said that we would revisit and look at flex time as a whole structure.
It's not quantitative data, but it was a different type of bringing the voice of the teams and what they're seeing work or not work with their teams. And so that's important data to use too.
So that gives you a very brief sense of what the charter school is doing. And you may already see some things that you're doing in your school, but we wanted to highlight a few things that you may have seen in the video.
And we also wanted to, as you can see here, highlight where there are some commonalities related to the structures, routines, and capacities that we've talked about with you today as it relates to building strong collaboration and culture. And so common meeting time, instructional leadership time are the structures, but the routines that they have in place, as you've noticed and potentially recall from the collaboration continuum, are certainly things like protocols, but also notice how they're working together and sharing information as it relates to the capacities that clearly there's strong trust and shared vision and ownership. So we just invite you to continue to think about the systems that support really strong culture and collaboration, drawing from hopefully the insights that Matt and I have been able to share with you as we've been with you today. And so if you have time, we'd like for you to think about a question that we contemplated and invite you to think about and discuss together, which is, as you're reflecting on the example and what you saw in the video, what would have to shift in the hybrid remote environment that you all will be no doubt facing as you return to schools in the fall, and what could stay the same? So we know there are things in the video that clearly they had to do because they were in person, but there certainly are practices that they were doing that could translate into a hybrid and remote context. So we invite you to really think about that and consider what you could bring forth in that hybrid remote environment and what could stay the same.
So thanks. I think we're going to transition into the last discussion section. We may have a few minutes left in order to do that. I just want to thank you all for your time and attention for this series. We greatly appreciate it. We know that this is a very challenging time for many educators, and that your planning and your work on school culture and collaboration are going to set the table for a really productive fall for your students in your schools. So thanks for your attention. There's lots of of resources and other things that we've added to this slide deck. So please take advantage of them. And I know that for myself, we're happy to hear from you. So please do email us with questions and ideas. And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go straight away to small group conversation. We'll have about 9 or 10 minutes for our small groups, and then we'll come back at about 5 minutes to the hour to wrap up. Here are the questions that we're going to ask you to think about. Matt and Rashida offered question number 3, and what would have to shift or what could stay the same if this team that we just saw collaborating found themselves in a remote or hybrid learning situation. But we also want you to think about what characteristics of a collaborating team did you see in the video of the Capital City Public Charter School, and then also what routines, processes, and structures supported that collaboration. How do you think the school developed those capacities and capabilities? And then to think about, what does your school structure look like? Do you have an instructional leadership team? And how do you, if so, how do you create the capacity, routines, and structures to maximize the effectiveness of that group? And what's your goal for the coming year around professional collaboration in your school? And what impact will the school closures that we had last spring and the fact that folks haven't been in the building for 6 months, what impact will that have on meeting that goal? So I'll invite you to small groups right now, and we'll come back at about 5 minutes to the hour to wrap things up. Okay, welcome back from your small group conversations, and hope that went well and that you're able to process. There's a lot of lots to think about, a lot of information in the video, and also just thinking about what collaboration and culture looks like in your own building. So thank you for taking the time to have that conversation with your colleagues. I have put into the chat box the link to the survey. We ask that you please take the survey. Again, we appreciate the feedback, and the Tennessee Department of Education uses that information to allocate your TASL credit to the appropriate year. So we've got just a moment or two left to be able to finish out our session today. And what I would ask is just if anyone has any thoughts or ideas or insights or takeaways from the small group conversation that they'd like to share with the larger group, just turn on your video and open up your microphone, and please share that out with us.
Hi, I'm Minthia from Memphis. There was a participant, Jeremy Sagar, who talked about the importance of having a parent. And I thought this was phenomenal, but he has a parent accountability partner. And I definitely wrote that down as something that I need for us to do per grade level, but to have parent accountability partners who work really closely with him, and gave him like 10 key points of what they want to see with this upcoming year. I thought that was very, very, very key.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. What a great idea. And to have that, that school culture extend, not just internally, but externally as well. And to have that kind of collaboration, not just with and among our staff and our teachers, but with our parents and our stakeholders. That's awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Other thoughts, ideas, takeaways from the small group conversation to share out?
Dr. McIntyre, in our group, we talked about instructional leadership teams, and we talked about frameworks and what that looks like in each one of our buildings. Principal Sanders, Germantown Elementary, one of my colleagues here in Memphis, she shared the process that she goes through with her leadership team, which I really like that concept. She allows the team members to pick their roles, and she supports them around that. So the conversations that we had was really rich, just around leadership and leading people. And then the accountability piece that each one of us shared was very important in terms of just really listening to your teachers, listening, and then setting a clear vision. I think one of the other colleagues who was in our small group talked about sharing a vision, whereas the teachers could connect to that vision. Once they were able to connect, you could really have some real meaningful conversations around the work and really get a lot of things accomplished. So I know I said a lot, I talk too much, but anyway, I just wanted to share that. But we really did have 3 great breakout sessions. Dr. Davis and Dr. Fleming did a tremendous job with our group.
Wonderful.
I'll shut up.
No. I appreciate that, Mr. Bush. I really appreciate the insights, because I think part of what the takeaway for me from this session is school culture and collaboration is successful when we're purposeful about it, when we're intentional about it. And this notion of, part of what we saw in Capital City and part of what we see in a lot of successful schools is that there are these routines and structures and protocols that are developed that really reinforce that school culture and really reinforce that collaboration in particular among our staff and our teachers. And it helps to build trust. It helps to build the relationships and the trust and the mutual accountability that leads to really effective school culture and collaboration. Great points. I really appreciate that, Mr. Bush. Thanks for sharing that. Other thoughts, other takeaways, other insights from the small group conversations?
I think for me, coming out of our small group session, one of the things that strikes me from the conversation and plus the overall session today is that this is probably the most important session that we've had so far, because this is such a different environment that we're walking back into, and it's proof positive that we cannot as leaders take on this task alone. We're going to have everybody carrying water on this one, and so collaboration is going to absolutely be key.
That's a great point, Jason. I appreciate that. I think building effective school culture that supports student learning, building effective collaboration for high quality instruction and personalized learning is hard in the best of circumstances. And as y'all know, we're in a very unprecedented moment, and this is going to be incredibly important. I couldn't agree more. I think this is going to be a really important focus, and sort of, from my perspective, getting the culture right and collaboration right, almost a prerequisite to being able to do the important work that we're doing in educating students. So I think I couldn't agree more. I think it's going to be really important to get this right this fall. Excellent point. And we probably have time for just one last comment, takeaway, insight from the small group conversation before we wrap up. Well, I certainly want to thank you all for your participation today and for your participation in the Principal Professional Learning Series. It's been a marvelous 7 sessions. And of course, we do have all of the slides and resources and all the recorded videos of the sessions at our website at the Center for Educational Leadership. So I certainly would encourage you to, if you missed one of our modules, to go back and take a look at that. Please do grab the survey that is in the chat box. And as I wrap up, I just want to really thank the Tennessee Department of Education and Tennessee SCORE for making this opportunity available. We really appreciate their support and the support of the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. I want to thank Matt Clifford from the American Institutes for Research and Rashida Lopez-Morgan from Education First for sharing their expertise today. But of course, as always, I want to wrap up by thanking you, our principals, for your extraordinary leadership, for the great work that you're doing for our kids, for supporting your staff and your teachers and your families and really your community. And we're just inspired by your incredible work and your incredible commitment to the children of Tennessee. So thank you, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great day. Please do take that survey and grab that out of the chat box before I close us out in just a few seconds here. Y'all take care.